Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Book Corner. I'm Hermione, author and lover of all good things literature. Happy Manatee Awareness Month. Anybody cares to know? Alright, so I'm redoing this video because of the fact is that when I uploaded it, they said there was no sound. So I don't know if it's the opening that caused the sound to go away. I really don't know. It's kind of just not something I like. So, what I want to talk about in this video is, this is VR to John A. Douglas's video, No Books for Men. And I'm going to kind of talk about that and talk about what it was like in the 90s when talking about fantasy and several other things, including a little bit more about the fantasy book that's coming out next year and everything. So he did this video about no books for men. There's no books out there that men really want to read unless you're talking about Dune or Stephen King or something like that, or your spy thrillers and all that. And I really think that he makes a lot of great points in that video. He went to Target and he just happened to go by the book section. I do that when I'm at Target, though I don't really do it during the winter months because I'm more into like staying inside where it's warm. And so he did that little short video because he kind of didn't want like Target employees to kind of corner him. I've actually done videos inside of Target myself. Nobody's really harassed me about it. But anyways, you go there and you really do not see books for men. It's all for women. It's catered to a huge female reading audience, and it does contain some of the most deprived and disgusting things that even as a reader and as definitely as a fantasy writer, I don't really like. I mean, I'm a woman and I don't like more than 80% of the modern day fantasies that are out there that's geared towards women. It kind of indicates that you're drawn to this kind of behavior, and it doesn't really make you a good person. It just does not. And I don't care what Barnes & Noble or these people say. If you're reading about a guy that forces himself on a woman and you're turned on by that, you kind of have a problem that needs to be talked about by a psychiatrist. So, a little bit of a history for people that were born this century. Back in the 90s, if you went to any major, bookstore, you went in the You went in the fantasy section, and literally every book that had fantasy in it was written by a man. And the reason for this is that fantasy was mainly ingested by men. There was a couple of women that probably did in fact read these stories, and these stories were fantastical and they were amazing, and you really rooted for the protagonist. You really wanted to see where he would go, and if there was a sequel, where would the sequels take this person. These books made authors a lot of money. It made publishing houses a lot of money. But what has happened over the course of the last 20, 25, maybe 30 years, I'll just give it 25, is you see the shift away from books written by men to books written by women. And the reason for this is that women have come in and they have said, this is the kind of book that we would like to read. We do not like those books from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're too full of misogyny. There's no women that are going out there and slaying dragons and stuff like that. And you had publishing houses that listened to them, especially when leadership changed and you had more women that were in these leadership roles. And I really think, and this is coming from a woman, that these change in leadership has been the reasoning or the reason behind the downgrading of good fantasy. Fantasy that makes you imagine living in this world. You have books that are full of pseudo-politics. I mean, let me take that back. Full of fake politics, because the politics in the fantasy world would never ever happen in the real world. And you have women that fantasize about living in this kind of world. I don't understand why you would want to live in that kind of world, but hey, if that's your cup of tea, go on ahead. What you're seeing now is you're not really seeing a lot of new male authors. They're going down. You're having more like grandfather fantasy authors like Brandon Sanderson, the guy who did Game of Thrones. You're having Jim Butcher, and Jim Butcher definitely has earned his right to be in the fantasy genre because he does write some damn good stories, and I absolutely love him as an author. And hey, I still have plenty of books that he's written that I've not even read yet, so I have plenty of time, books to read. But he also claims that it's going up to book 20. I don't know, maybe all the way to book 22. I'm not exactly sure, but he did use the word 2 to describe how many books would actually be in the Dresden Files series. So what's going to happen when he finishes the last book and we have no more Harry Dresden? I think that a lot of men who do enjoy his books are going to be like, I have nothing to read now. If you go into Barnes & Noble, this is very apparent, absolutely apparent, that you are being inundated with books written by women. You do not see books written by men having any kind of prominence on these tables. You do not see books written by men that have their own display thing, except for Riordan. He always gets his own display thing. But if you go into the fantasy section, depending on what Barnes & Noble you go to, it is generally a tiny section. It is generally dominated solely by female authors. And you have a scattering smidget morsels of male authors. This, and I do agree with one other person, this has created an imbalance in fantasy where you're so hyped up on pandering to women that, and I will be clear, okay, there are women who actually sit down and read a book. I have been hearing about women that just skip huge chunks of a book, and I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you skipping like 80% of the book? Like, you have no idea what the book is about. You have no idea what went on. You have no idea why this character did what he or she did. You have no idea because you're so obsessed over less words. And I will say this to the authors that have suffered this kind of mistreatment. I feel for you. I don't care if you do freaking dark academia or dark fantasy with like whips and chains, okay? I don't care. If your book is being like this by clueless readers that have no clue what the heck you're trying to get at, I feel for you. I really do. And it's like limited brain space. There's like no space in the brain. There's none at all. I would be pissed off if I got a review, oh, I gave your book 2 stars, and then they don't give a reason. Like why is it you give my book 2 stars but you don't write anything about what you didn't like about the book? And I will admit, I give books 5 stars and I don't give a reason. And quite plainly, because I just feel like that I do these videos and I post these on YouTube and stuff, and I am getting back into TikTok while it's still, we have 2 months left of TikTok before it goes away. Um, but this is the thing. This is the thing that really gets my goat. Is you go and spend $14.99 either for a Kindle edition of the book or a physical copy of the book, and you're not reading it. You're just taking snippets so you can do a book review video. So yeah, that's another. And what's going on is authors are seeing that their readers have very limited attention spans, so they make sure that the fonts are large. They don't really go into detailed explanations of why people are doing what they're doing. I was like, why? Why are you doing this? And I'm writing another fantasy book. It's not the Dragon Queen. It's not even. It's not Dragon Flame. I don't even have a title for the book yet. But I really tried to pack each page with as many words as possible. And if y'all don't like it, I don't know what to say to you. I really don't. But that's the thing that gets me, and that's the thing that really, really worries me as someone who loves books, who reads books, who has a freaking Kindle, where I'm reading the Black Crown, which is from the same author that said there was no books for men. But another thing that I'm really noticing is that you don't have women who want to read books by male authors. And the reasoning is quite simple. They don't want to experience fantasy from how men write it. They don't want to experience a world the way men write it, because they have this belief that there is going to be misogyny and all this type of stuff from the book. And that deprives women, especially women who want to read good books, of good books, because they already have it set out in their own mind that the books that are written by men are bad. They are not the kinds of books that they personally enjoy, and therefore they're not going to give it any chance. I'm a woman, and I've given The Black Crown a chance, and I will admit I am really enjoying this book. Yeah. So it's it's bad, and yeah, I mean, as I said, or I think I said this, but I'll repeat it. The books that came out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were geared towards men, but I bet you, women snuck some of their husbands' fantasy books and was reading them. You cannot tell me that they weren't. They probably were. And they probably fell in love with those stories as well. And now they're in their 80s or 90s, and they're seeing what's going on, and they're like, that's not the books that I smuggled out of our room to kind of read while you were at work kind of books. And I'm pretty sure they're really not a fan of them. And of course you have the insane amount of sex scenes, depending on the author. Some authors already write down, I'm only going to write like 8 sex scenes. Why are sex scenes in fantasy anyways? I don't understand it at all. And, I mean, men don't really want to read that. I mean, some men don't really want to read it. There are men out there that would want to read it. And hey, go ahead, Barnes & Noble, as a, you dude. Go to Barnes & Noble and get your romantasy. I fully support you in doing that. But it kind of shows this kind of problem when it comes to a lot of people and their disregard for what is considered good literature. I'm not talking about the next great American novel or the novel that has complicated thing where you gotta sit there and really think hard. I'm talking about just good, or I would say decent to halfway decent storytelling. Instead, women go and buy shitty novels that rot their brains. And these are people, and these characters in these books are people I never ever want to encounter. I never want to meet them. I don't want to meet the dragon, that girl, that general's daughter's boyfriend. I never want to meet him. He does not sound like a guy that would give me a good relationship. More of a control kind of thing. I don't want to be in a kind of relationship in Haunting Adeline, or if that was a relationship in Haunting Antalai. I never read the book, and I have no intention ever to read the book. I don't want to be the twin in the Zodiac Academy that gets bullied and harassed and all that type of stuff. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be those characters. Those characters are not the kind of characters that are any good. They are just really, really badly written characters. But when you have that kind of epidemic of, like, female authors sit down and they'll spend a couple of months writing a book, and either they will not edit it or they allow the publishing house to edit it, and then people eat it up. It tells the author, oh, your really bad writing is what people really want. And I think that's what publishing houses are seeing, is they're seeing these really super bad stories making them a shit ton of money, and they are like, hey, we don't have to have any kind of standards anymore. And the standards is what enabled fantasy to survive and thrive the way that it did. And yes, I will be the first one to acknowledge that when we're talking about fantasy and and basically fantasy changing, it's all because people's tastes have changed, because they no longer want to know what's going to happen to the protagonist. They want to know how many women that he goes to bed with, which is stupid. But anyways, I think that as women push more and more men, or more and more men leave the industry and decide, yeah, I've made my little cozy little nest egg, I don't need to write anymore, you're going to start seeing more and more women coming in and taking those empty slots. And before long, you're not going to be able to buy a book from Barnes & Noble that is not written by a woman. And that is just a shame, because we're going to be introduced to really bad stories, really bad characters, and really bad habits. Now, what is the threat to traditional publishing and this wave of garbage and sewage that we are being forced to see people review about? Well, independent publishing. And Amazon, 1 month, I am not joking, I am not making this up, 1 month they made $63 point something million from independent authors. Now, if you're a guy called Jeff Bezos, and you are not having to pay for printing, for stock, for none of that stuff, you're making a lot of money. Yes, you got to pay money to maintain your servers, which affects the entire Amazon ecosystem. But other than that, other than what you're already paying out just to keep your website going and making sure that orders get shipped out, you are not taking any kind of loss. And that's what self-publishing authors are doing, is they're writing these books, both good and bad. Because, first of all, they want total control over their characters. They don't want to be at the beck and call of traditional publishers. And they want freedom to be able to write. And sure enough, they go and they write. And if huge amounts of people go and they like the book, then if you're a woman, you're going to get picked up by a traditional publisher some of the time. If you're a guy and write fantasy, you're not going to be picked up by a traditional publisher. But then the downside of being picked up by a traditional publisher is they will go in there and say, well, you know, I know that your book is really popular, but we're going to change some things. I don't like how you describe this person, or I don't like how, but you needed to add some more sex scenes to this, and you're like, that's not what I want in my book, and I don't want words changed. But then they go, sorry, we're going to change words. We're going to add gender neutral terms and all that stuff, totally going against the author. And that's what you give up when you're traditionally published. You give up total control over your work. So why is there not a lot of men reading fantasy? Or that is because women control that genre and everything. So, speaking of my book, which I tell you I do not have a title for, it takes place in Utah. I just randomly picked a state. Utah, and it's about a girl named Gwen who discovers that she is a magical practitioner. There is no magic at all in, actually, there is small amount of magic, but not a lot. And she has to go back into the world in which her ancestor had left, and has to figure out how to control her abilities. So, anyways, it's going to be a clean, decent, wholesome, fun book. One that I hope people will enjoy. It's going to be available on Kindle and on physical. And I'm going with a website that will allow me to have a beautifully drawn and colored cover. And over the course, my goal right now is only 3 books. But if I feel like there's more story for her to be in, I will expand it to 4. So we'll just see what happens, and I will see you guys around.